What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 6 Monday Night Football.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for this Monday Night Football 2-game slate. We have the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, and then the Arizona Cardinals and the Dallas Cowboys.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay guys, NFL, let's take a look at this Monday Night Football showdown. Well, we have 2 showdown games, and then we have a 2-game main slate, and these picks will apply for both games and all slates, so let's get into it. Okay, at the quarterback position, we have 3 elite quarterbacks on the slate here tonight. My first quarterback is Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Buffalo Bills, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes has averaged 29.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.8 rush attempts per game. He scored 34, 20, and 43 fantasy points in the last 3 games, projected at 27.5 fantasy points here tonight. He's $7,500 DraftKings salary and $1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, 56.5 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 5. So high-scoring game, pretty close game, just within 5 points here, within 1 score. Great matchup, so I like Patrick Mahomes here versus the Buffalo Bills. And the next quarterback that I like is Kyler Murray from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Kyler Murray has averaged 27.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.2 rush attempts per game. So I like those rushing attempts from the quarterback. Great for fantasy football value. He scored 30, 24, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games, projected at 23.9 fantasy points here tonight. He's $7,300 DraftKings salary and $1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, 54.5 points scored in this game, with the Cardinals favored by 1. So you should know by now that the Dallas Cowboy defense is awful. They've been giving up a ton of points every single week. So that puts Kyler Murray in a great spot here tonight. So I like Kyler Murray here versus the Dallas Cowboys. And another quarterback that has big rushing upside, I like Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. And although they've been pretty good versus opposing quarterbacks, Josh Allen has averaged 30.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.8 rush attempts per game. He scored 18, 25, and 36 fantasy points in the last 3 games, projected at 23.5 fantasy points here tonight. He's $6,800 DraftKings salary and $700 more on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. They have the Bills trailing by 5 in this one, so it could be a passing game script as the Buffalo Bills play from behind. Josh Allen can run the ball, and he's coming off of a subpar performance last week, so I like this bounce back spot. Even though the matchup is not great, I think Josh Allen is going to have to pass the ball quite a bit in this one, so I like Josh Allen here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. My favorite running back on the slate, and for good reason. Without Dak Prescott, they should have to run the ball quite a bit this game, so I like Ezekiel Elliott from the Dallas Cowboys playing the Arizona Cardinals, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Ezekiel Elliott has averaged 22.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 17.8 rush attempts per game and 6.4 pass targets per game. He got 19 rush attempts and 2 pass targets last game. Dak was injured in that game. Now he's out. They got Andy Dalton coming in there. I don't really trust Andy Dalton. I know he's a pro. I know he could be a starter on other teams, but he's no Dak Prescott. I think they hand the ball off to Ezekiel Elliott, who's on the field for 88% of the snaps. He touches the ball 36% of that time. I'm expecting his touch count to go up in this one. He's projected at 20.6 fantasy points here tonight. He's $7,700 DraftKings salary and $1,400 more on FanDuel. So great matchup here. I think it's going to be a running game script. I think he gets a ton of volume. So I like Ezekiel Elliott here versus the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, now, even though this team just signed Le'Veon Bell to their roster, he's not active here tonight. So I like Clyde EdwardsHelaire from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Buffalo Bills, who have the 9th worst defense overall and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing running backs. Clyde EdwardsHelaire has averaged 15.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 16.2 rush attempts per game and 5.4 pass targets per game. He got 8 pass targets last game, so he's involved in the passing game, gives him some extra upside in fantasy. He's projected at 17.1 fantasy points here tonight. He's 6,000 DraftKings salary and 700 more on FanDuel. So Vegas has the Chiefs favored by 5 in this game. So if they get up on the Bills, this guy could get more volume here tonight, but he is involved in the passing game, and without Le'Veon Bell in the mix yet, I think it's going to be his last night to shine as the featured back. So I like Clyde EdwardsHelaire here versus the Buffalo Bills. Okay, now Devin Singletary, he's got a pretty good matchup here. The Kansas City Chiefs give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing running backs, and he's only $5,100 DraftKings salary and $600 more on FanDuel, but he's only averaging 11.8 fantasy points per game on the season. His volume is a little bit low here, only averaging 12.2 rush attempts per game and 4.4 pass targets per game. But he is on the field for 70% of the snaps, and he's projected at 13.7 fantasy points here tonight. I just worry that the Kansas City Chiefs get an early lead and Devin Singletary is game scripted out of this one, but his salary is low enough where I don't mind the play here. So I don't mind Devin Singletary if you're looking to change it up and get a little bit of salary relief to stack your wide receivers. But if you are looking for a low salary running back here on Monday night, I would go with Kenyan Drake from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Kenyan Drake, he hasn't been very good this season, only averaging 10.3 fantasy points per game on the season, but he's got 17 rush attempts per game and 1.2 pass targets per game. So not as much involvement in the passing game as I would like, but he's projected at 12.6 fantasy points here tonight, and he's only $4,800 DraftKings salary and $800 more on FanDuel. So if you've been chasing this big game from Kenyan Drake, if it doesn't come versus the Dallas Cowboys, I don't think it's going to come this season. So if you're looking to play Kenyan Drake, this is the game to do it. So I like Kenyan Drake here versus the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. We have a smash play here at the wide receiver position. DeAndre Hopkins from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the third most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. DeAndre Hopkins has averaged 23.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 10.6 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 93% of the snaps. He's projected at 20.2 fantasy points here tonight. He's $7,900 DraftKings salary and $600 more on FanDuel. So DeAndre Hopkins, fantastic matchup here. He should be able to tear the Dallas Cowboys secondary apart. I'm going to make room in my lineup for this guy, so I like DeAndre Hopkins here versus the Dallas Cowboys.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL, MLB is still going, NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, so I like Tyreek Hill and I like Stefon Diggs. Tyreek Hill, he's been averaging 18.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7 pass targets per game. He's gotten 6 pass targets in each of his last 3 games, so not a ton of pass volume. He is on the field for 87% of the snaps, projected at 17.9 fantasy points here tonight, but he's $6,700 DraftKings salary and $1,200 more on FanDuel. So I know this is a big play wide receiver. This guy can break a slate, but if I'm going to pass on one of these high-priced wide receivers, I think I'm going to pass on Tyreek Hill tonight. I wouldn't completely fade him out of all your lineups. I'll have a lineup with Tyreek Hill, but I prefer the other pass catchers on this slate. And then we have Stefon Diggs from the Buffalo Bills. He doesn't have a great matchup here. The Kansas City Chiefs have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they've given up the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. But Stefon Diggs has averaged 21.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 10.2 pass targets per game. He got 16 pass targets last game. He's on the field for 90% of the snaps, and he's $6,200 DraftKings salary and $500 more on FanDuel, projected at 16.9 fantasy points here tonight. And despite the bad matchup, you could see a game script where he gets 10 to 15 pass targets in this one, especially if the Buffalo Bills fall behind early. So I think he's by far the best receiver to stack with Josh Allen if you're going to go that way. So I like Stefon Diggs here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, now this player, normally if Dak Prescott was in at quarterback, I would play him. His salary's low. He's only $5,500 DraftKings salary, $800 more on FanDuel. It's Amari Cooper from the Dallas Cowboys playing the Arizona Cardinals, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they've been pretty good versus opposing wide receivers, giving up the 5th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So the matchup concerns me. And then Andy Dalton at quarterback is a little bit concerning for me here. Is he going to be able to throw the deep ball to Amari Cooper? I'm not so sure. Now, Amari Cooper has averaged 19 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 11 pass targets per game, but he only got 4 pass targets last week, only scored 4 fantasy points. He is projected at 15.1 fantasy points here tonight, but I think I'm going to pass on Amari Cooper. Even though they have him priced down here, I just don't trust Andy Dalton quite yet. So I'm going to pass on Amari Cooper here versus the Arizona Cardinals. Now, if you're looking for a value play here at the wide receiver position, take a look at Christian Kirk from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the third most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Christian Kirk has averaged 8.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.3 pass targets per game, but he scored 13 fantasy points off of 7 pass targets last game. He's on the field for 67% of the snaps, projected at 10.9 fantasy points here tonight. He's only $4,500 DraftKings salary and $900 more on FanDuel. So if the Dallas Cowboys are going to try to take away DeAndre Hopkins, that may allow Christian Kirk to get loose in the secondary. Fantastic matchup here. So I like Christian Kirk here versus the Dallas Cowboys. In another value play at the wide receiver position, Sammy Watkins is going to be out this game, so that should give more volume for Mecole Hardman from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Buffalo Bills, who have the 9th worst defense overall and they're middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Mecole Hardman has averaged 9.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3.4 pass targets per game. He scored 7, 13, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 weeks. So despite the low pass volume, he's been a productive fantasy player. Now he should get more opportunity with no Sammy Watkins in this game. He's projected at 11.7 fantasy points here tonight, and he's only $4,200 DraftKings salary and $1,000 more on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 56.5 points scored in this game. So plenty of fantasy points to go around in this one. I think he gets a few extra pass targets here, giving him some extra opportunity to score some fantasy points. So I like Mecole Hardman here versus the Buffalo Bills. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. If you have the extra salary in your lineup, take a look at Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Buffalo Bills, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Travis Kelce has averaged 18.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.2 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 87% of the snaps, projected at 17.4 fantasy points here tonight. He's $6,900 DraftKings salary and $700 more on FanDuel. So fantastic matchup here. He's getting a ton of passing volume. His production has been fantastic. So I like Travis Kelce here versus the Buffalo Bills. And if you're looking to save a little money at the tight end position, take a look at Dalton Schultz from the Dallas Cowboys playing the Arizona Cardinals, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing tight ends. Dalton Schultz has averaged 10.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.2 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 74% of the snaps, projected at 8.7 fantasy points here tonight. He's $4,300 DraftKings salary and $700 more on FanDuel. So Dalton Schultz could be a safety valve here for Andy Dalton as he gets comfortable with the offense. So I like Dalton Schultz here versus the Arizona Cardinals.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.